Hello, and welcome to the Esoteric Survivalist. This is Ari, or AC, your resident Magus regarding everything survivalist where the esoteric is concerned. I would like to talk about the survival of the psyche, of the integrity of the psyche within a spiritually bleak landscape. And when I say spiritually bleak, I mean that life is meaningless, devoid of color. That the way things are going do not feel right. It isn't just insecurity, it isn't just personal fears. The whole existence that we're facing is contradictory to us existing as we desire. Basically, we're clashing with fate itself in a spiritually bleak environment. This isn't just being dumbed down or simplified or put in a mental box. Those are the mind's problems. This also isn't so much about past trauma, because when you're facing a spiritual crisis, that's when you need to be a survivalist, and so-called past trauma is in your face. There are no solutions to it that are immediate that will prevent you from experiencing the gist of it, shall we say, the discomfort of it. Why? Because who else is there? There is nobody to take away the pain. There is nobody to essentially smother the pattern. There is only us. That does not mean we are alone, but there comes a point in the time when our own body-mind depends upon our spirit. Our spirit is the driver. Our spirit is the consciousness. And when the body-mind or feeling nature or physical nature, even psychosomatic nature, when our inner nature, sometimes the heart, sometimes the gut, sometimes the intuition in the head, when it feels like things are off, there are many things in our environment that seem to interfere the natural process of discernment and of adaptation and of possible purification if necessary. So what does that mean? That means that we need to redefine ourselves as ourselves. And we need to be very, very careful when and how we do that. Because what we are doing is extracting ourselves from everything around us, when we do this, of course. The dogmas, the belief systems, the realities, the whatever. You're going into your own being and saying, okay, whatever the world is, it exerts a pressure on me. And when the pressure is too much, I feel overwhelmed, I feel burdened. It's like being in excessive gravity. I can hardly move. My emotions can hardly move. Everything feels sluggish, dense. And maybe my intellect is pacing fast, or maybe my emotions are pacing fast, but my intellect is slow, or my body is having problems. See, things are not right. And they're not aligned when that happens. And I've just observed many people experiencing things like this. Many people going through crises, and that's par for the course. But in a spiritual emergency, when you don't have an inner core, when your very reality sense is breaking down, it's almost like a form of psychosis. But this kind of psychosis is almost collective. That's comforting in some ways, but in other ways it's alarming because the force of it is far stronger than if it were an individual thing. Many minds are very, very resilient, but when it comes to a collective force, it's more difficult to resist. So the mind needs to be stronger, but the mind cannot be stronger unless the spirit itself is fortified, and that can be done. There are responses of the body-mind, there are orientations of the self where the consciousness aligns and is able to touch base with itself, so you can get a sense of who you really are, the wondrous being that you really are, without any flattering or whatever. It's just a fact. That is a fact. The wondrous super being, the great being, but this being isn't manifest in the body-mind. In fact, the body-mind may be housing consciousness that isn't even its own. It may be an interloper, it may be a parasite, or it may be something instilled by society itself, without any blame being cast in particular for any particular, specific parties doing this. But the way society is, the adaptive nature of it, the way it wants to move forward, compromises the human psyche, and everybody knows that. And we're almost like on a treadmill where nothing can be done about it. That is not the point of this discussion. This discussion says it's time to get in and bolster the internal workings of yourself. And that requires sincere spirit. Now, spirit is a little different than just mind. The mind would interpret integrity in terms of morality. The mind has to deal with the instinctive nature itself as well, but spirit doesn't have that. There is no need for that, and spirit is on its own, of course. But spirit does have drives, and there are drives that cause emotions. It's very hard to feel a spiritual drive by itself. The drive of love, for example, is an unconditional feeling, but without something to reflect it back, like the substance of nature, of the tangible, the divine feminine, shall we say, then it just goes out into the void and never comes back. Here you have a loop. You have a sacred Ouroboros. And this is where people have it wrong. The Ouroboros is not a satanic symbol. It is just a cycle of power, of movement, of energy. The serpent, the wave. It is a representation. So it goes around. It bites its tail. It comes back into itself. Scientists call that feedback. And feedback is a foundation of consciousness. And feedback within the nature, through being observant, through looking at oneself and saying, okay, it's not so much I want to find out who I am because I'm curious. It's just because I want to get out of my way so who I am reveals itself. What is in my way? And you may discover you get out of your way, but then all these other yous or something posing as you is still in your way. And part of these discussions, I'm not talking, it's not a dialogue, but part of this commentary is about moving through that. Addressing the mind in a way that it can relate to spirit without some hoity-toity, high and mighty, dogmatic conception about it. And without the opportunity for spiritual bypass either. Spiritual bypass is when we don't want to feel bad, so we're going to do anything we can not to, even if it's detrimental to our overall situation, to our relationships, to whatever. At the end of the day, it is, for whatever reason, a cause of the inability to make anything better. At the same time, the situation is never as it seems. So when you offer spiritual survivalist help, spiritual first aid, you might say, when you offer spiritual first aid, the important thing is for the individual to be able to find an opportunity to lift themselves up from their bootstraps and realize that it is not really walking a razor's edge. It's walking a regularly paved road, but there are forces that are trying to run you off that road, to kick you off the edge. It has an edge, but it's a fairly wide road. You shouldn't have a problem moving through it, shall we say, metaphorically speaking. But it, like I said, it has an edge, and there are powerful forces that have entrenched themselves in our lives. And what are these forces? I'm not saying entities, okay? We're trying to keep things at the bare essence. We don't have to personify anything. Sometimes it might help, but initially, in the bare bones dynamics of the situation, we don't have to look at anything as a tool because it's part of us. Everything we interact with is part of us and we're part of it. That continuity of being will help bolster the psychic immune system because it's an awareness where spirit or consciousness can actually come in and start perceiving that continuity of being instead of always dealing with blind spots. The mind is full of blind spots. We don't know where we're going. We don't know where we're coming. So we take our information from whatever has trained us in those blind spots to orient in any ways, wherever we place our trust. This is true in the external world. It's also true for our intuition, because sometimes our intuition is not reliable. What's reliable? What do we do? Well, it is the quest for true spirit. And this quest for true spirit is not a long journey. It's really a matter of the kingdom being within. So in order to, when you discover true spirit, your true spirit, who you are, your consciousness, then things become far easier because you have a touchstone. You have a reference frame. And so that's where we're going to go into. Now, all of this seems like an introduction, but we are actually taking segments that need pondering, unscripted, but as needed, so to speak. So I'm going to leave you with that. And thank you for listening. Magus out.